Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and thank you for being looking at my YouTube videos and being on my Facebook page and being on my websites. I really appreciate it very, very much, and I hope everybody is enjoying a very happy, safe day. I thought we'd start with Hurricane Otto, which decided during the last 12 hours before landfall to become almost a Category 3 hurricane. And this is moved inland now in southern Nicaragua. You can see how the eye just all of a sudden at the last few frames just really became very well defined. It looked like it strengthened fairly rapidly right before landfall and now is continuing to move on a course toward the west. So it's probably going to it's going to emerge on the Pacific side, and it'll also will likely still be a tropical storm when it does that. So it's going to change names. I don't know what the next name is in the Pacific. There hasn't been one out there in quite a while, but it does happen from time to time that you get weather systems crossing from the Atlantic to the Pacific side, but not too often. Of course, this being the latest observed hurricane in the Southern Caribbean since Hurricane Martha in 1969. So there it goes as it moves on inland. And this should be the last one. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, by the way, top winds were at about 110 miles an hour at the time of landfall. So let's take a look at what's going on weather-wise because we have the big shopping day on Friday, and people would like to get around. And while it does look gray and ominous on the satellite loop here, a lot of these clouds aren't really producing very much. There's some moisture that's moving through the northeast at the moment. You can see the weather across the southeast and Florida, back across the Gulf states and Texas and on up into the Rockies. Pretty good for today. And when we move on to the west coast, you can see there's another storm that's coming in off the Pacific Northwest with a big arm of moisture that extends from southwestern Canada across the northwest states of Washington and Oregon and then runs out into the ocean. So this is going to gradually work its way southeastward and probably spread some rains into California over time. And eventually there'll probably be some rains developing even in the southwest. As we take a look at the radar at the moment in the east, we've got some scattered showers, and in the colder air, there's some snow going on in parts of upstate New York, but it's mostly light. And we have some showers moving off the Carolinas, and that's about it. The weather is dry throughout much of the rest of the nation. As we move across the south, you can see there's very little. And I'll also move across the northern part of the country. We have some scattered precipitation up into the Dakotas and Minnesota, and then we have that heavier rain that's moved in now into the Pacific Northwest, in northwestern Oregon and throughout much of western Washington, with some snow back on the other side of the mountains. So kind of just moving right along here. I want to point out that it looks to me like we could have a shot for some serious rain here next week. And when I say serious rain, I mean serious in the sense that it could go a long way in alleviating the drought conditions over the Northeast, and there might even be some rain for the middle and South Atlantic states, which have been moisture starved. And that's going to be the case through the weekend, by the way, moisture starved. There's going to be a little bit of snow up in New England, and that's about it. And then high pressure is going to be in control. It'll be a little chilly in the Northeast and down into the mid-Atlantic states, but that's about the only place where we really see any cold air at the moment. Now, I'm showing you the Canadian model because the Canadian model, in terms of its precipitation field, is closer to the European, and unfortunately, we're not permitted to show you the European precip maps and everything else, but the European implies 2 solid shots of rain, and the Canadian goes along with this. It forms a deep storm. When I say deep, I mean intense in eastern Iowa, and it lifts a lot of Gulf moisture up the coast. Now, that moisture tends to hold for the northern mid-Atlantic states and into New England. It kind of thins out a bit for the South Atlantic states. But because this system is going so far to the west, there's going to be another wave that's going to develop on this later next week, and that stands to bring some much-needed rain for the Carolinas along about the middle of next week. And then again, another good shot for the northeast because this low deepens or intensifies as it moves up into western New York and then eventually moves northeastward from there. One of the primary differences between the European and the Canadian model and even the GFS is that it does turn colder on the European, significantly colder behind that second system into the first few days of December. And you can see the Canadian tries to edge up another wave here along next weekend. We'll see how real that is or not. But we're gradually seeing this pattern transition over. Where the GFS is a little different is, and I'll back it up for you, where the GFS is a little different is that it's a little slower with that first system and way north and west with it too. So you can see it takes a low up into the Dakotas, and then a second wave develops here, a weaker one, and moves on its way up towards Chicago. So it takes longer for that first shot of rain to get in here. It doesn't get in here until late Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, whereas the European has it into the Northeast already by late Tuesday afternoon. And it sort of combines the second wave that's going to develop here in terms of the areas of precipitation. So it shows a large area of rain and some heavy rains down into the Carolinas and Georgia and over into parts of western South Carolina, down to the coast into parts of eastern Alabama and the panhandle of Florida. And it also starts to generate some heavy rains through much of interior Pennsylvania, northwestern New Jersey, and gradually that shifts to the coast and into southern New England. The European has it more along the lines of two distinct separate areas. The outcome may wind up being the same in terms of rainfall, and I want to show you that, the forecast rainfall amounts, because this is important. If this plays out, the GFS actually is very bullish with rainfall amounts, with 3.5, 4-inch amounts in western North Carolina on up through the interior of Virginia, and then a large area of 4-inch plus amounts for the entire rain event for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, virtually all of southern New England and upstate New York. So this could be a really good, nice dent into the drought, and even bring some rain in areas to the south that have been not only bone dry but have been fighting a lot of the fires that have been going on. Now, with regards to the upper air pattern, I mentioned a few weeks ago a number of times, and I guess it is worth repeating, in that these pattern changes that we go through can be very grueling processes, and no doubt that the pattern has changed, but we are seeing now a change within a change, and that's going to take more time to play out. So we have to see how this all goes over time. But the overall flavor of the pattern is that we have that negative North Atlantic oscillation going on. That is, we're seeing higher than normal pressures across the northern Atlantic area here, and that as a result does displace the jet stream further south. That's nothing's changed here, but the one big positive in all this is that we continue to see weather system after weather system coming in, and each one seems to be getting progressively stronger, that it has more to work with. So at the very least, we're going to keep getting these opportunities for drought denting precipitation events, and I think over time it is going to turn colder. Now, this particular model run makes a deep trough out to the west, and you can see it here on this upper air map that I'm putting up. I'll use the black because it'll show up better, but it has a deep trough out in the west, and it temporarily, because you have a deep trough in one place, you've got to have a strong ridge to compensate that in other places, and you do. You have a strong ridge that builds off the Atlantic coast northward into southeastern Canada, and you have one that builds up the western edge of the Rockies up into western Canada, because there's another trough that's approaching the Pacific Northwest, and you can see it right here. So there's a lot of energy running around in the atmosphere, so this is all a positive. What happens is, it seems that as each one of these upper air storms, each one of these that develops and goes by, the trough position tries to shift a little bit further east. The GFS has the most difficult time with this, because if we look here, this is going to be a week from this coming Sunday. It has another deep trough that it forms out in the west in the plains. And as a result, you have a ridge that builds in the east and one that builds up in the west. So that's that model's look. But if we look at the European model, which I can show you the upper air with the European, it's decidedly different. In fact, this is a very wintry look that the European is showing in the long term. So it remains to be seen whether this is going to be the look. But you have this vortex that forms that takes over near Newfoundland. What we sometimes looks like it might want to gravitate to where we call the 50-50 low, 50 degrees north, 50 degrees west. And what that does, that's a signature position to bring cold air into the eastern part of the United States. And what you have on the jet stream is a kind of a split flow out in the west, split by the fact that you have this polar jet to the north, and then you have this Pacific jet to the south. In the meantime, what the model also does is that there's energy that's right there. Okay, you also have a big upper low in the southwest. This look on the European is so much different than what the GFS has. Remember, I just showed you the GFS, which had the upper trough, and I'll draw that in purple for you. The GFS had that upper trough here and a big ridge in the east like this. So you could see the huge jet stream difference in the two models. So it remains to be seen which one is going to wind up being more correct on this. The signals as far as the North Atlantic oscillation and the East Pacific, all these oscillation indexes that we look at seem to favor the Europeans' view more than it does the GFS's view. So we'll see how the models handle the long range. But if the European is correct, this is going to evolve into a pattern in the Northeast that not only will be cold, but it opens up a potential southern storm track, and that would increase the probability of some snow events as we start getting into and a little deeper into the month of December for places like the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, and even the Mid-Atlantic states. So this is something that I think we're going to need to pay attention to going forward. In the meantime, it's all, I guess, part of the weather excitement for me is watching this all play out over time. You know what? We don't do this too often, but since we have it, let's look at the ensembles. See, now this is the ensemble. What the ensembles are is that, there are a dozen or more variations, without getting too technical. There are a dozen or more variations of the European, of the model runs. And each one has a couple of different parameters in it. So the model, when they run them, they all kind of come up with different results. So what they do is they put together an average look. And this is the average look of the GFS, which is, it's nothing special, but it does, you can see where the troughing is in the longer term with the GFS. It's much more to the west here with that little bit of ridging here in the east, and weather systems that continue to just move along. When we look at the European, I'm looking at it for the first time, so I'm going to just do it with you. The European ensembles are not quite the same because you have that area off the East Coast, what I talked about, the 50-50 low. The ensembles on the European favor, that something over here in terms of the upper air system, and you've got this jet, this colder jet that comes into play, and then you still have this active southern jet here with weather systems attempting to move along it. So overall, I think this is going to be a very interesting month coming up for the month of December. Either we're going to wind up with a lot of rain events, which is going to do a ton of good as far as the drought is concerned. And if the European is correct, it's going to gradually encompass a colder view. So we live in interesting times in the weather world. It's always changing, always something fascinating going on. And, you kind of move along through the process and see how things evolve. Okay, so you know what? Enough of the weather videos. Go finish your Thanksgiving dinner, or if you're watching this evening, hit the Thanksgiving leftovers and the desserts. And tomorrow, the big shopping day, you'll have all the food that you took in today. You can use it. You'll be burning off energy tomorrow going from store to store. Happy Thanksgiving. And you can check out all the latest on meteorologistjoechaffee.com, nycweathernow.com, weatherlongisland.com, and ssstormchasers.com.